Hello and good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with the third lecture on Shunyavaad Darshan, today we would be talking more on the topic that is Shunyavaad Darshan. And for this very topic, we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Ajay Verma. Dr. Ajay Verma is currently teaching in Center of Philosophy, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. Dr. Verma has immense experience. Let's take advantages from his experiences and let's enlighten ourselves with the topic Shunyavaad Darshan. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
So welcome viewers. As you know, we have already in our earlier lectures, in our earlier two lectures, we have already talked about Buddhism from a historical perspective. We have already learnt about some of the main teachings of Buddhism, and in our last lecture we also learnt about some of the main differences between the Hinayana and Mahayana traditions in Buddhism. We looked at some of the main ideas behind Shunyavada. We also talked about the propounder of the system, Nagarjuna. We talked about how this particular branch of Buddhism takes a kind of deviation from some of the earlier interpretations that we know of within Buddhism. So in the same series, today we'll be talking further about Shunyavada philosophy. Today we'll be discussing more on the idea of Shunyata. What does it signify? And where is the idea of Shunyata mainly derived from? So to look at that, first of all, we need to define. We need to again look at what are the main questions that Shunyavada philosophy, like many other schools, is addressing. So, as I pointed out in the last lecture, also one of the central questions in philosophy, or for that matter in other disciplines also, for that matter even in science, one of the main questions that we take into consideration is about the whatness of things. What is it that defines the things, or what exactly is the nature of an object? So the idea is that we want to have some kind of an in-depth knowledge about the nature of the world generally and the nature of its objects. But before we do an examination of what exactly is the nature of the world or of an object, Buddhism, first, before treating this path, the path of this inquiry, first of all, we need to look at the notion of nature of an object itself. So, what Shunyavada does is that they don't deny the fact that the question of nature of world, the questions regarding the nature of world generally, and the questions regarding the nature of different objects that exist in the world is very important. But before making any statements about the definite nature of the world and so on and so forth, Shunyavadan philosopher first discuss the very notion of, or the idea of, what we generally call as the own nature or swabhava that constitutes the whatness or thatness of an object. So, first and foremost, Mahayana Buddhism, especially Shunyavad philosophy, would take into consideration the question regarding the definition of swabhava. What do we mean? What do we understand by the term swabhava? What kind of definition regarding the nature of the world we are looking for. So, first of all, that we regarding the question about how to define whatness or own being or swabhava of things, we need to understand that this question has immense philosophical value, and and the nature of a thing or its thatness, which derives from the word tattva, tat meaning that and va meaning the ness, so thatness. So the thing or its thatness, that is tattva, basically what we mean is something that is definitive about a particular object, or something that makes the thing, that makes that particular object what it is supposed to be or what it actually is. So the idea of the nature of things is that there has to be a reason, why we consider a particular thing to be of a particular kind. So, say for example, when we call a pot, the term in Sanskrit is ghata. So, when we call a particular object as a ghata, there must be some reason for us to have that idea about that particular object. There has to be some kind of a reason for us to believe that this particular object is is this or that. So, it's not such a kind of a plain question as it seems to be. Philosophically speaking, these reasons have to have something kind of definite about, in the sense that whatever reasons we offer for an object, for considering an object to be what it is, have to be have to be like these features. I mean, if our definition is based upon certain features, so whichever way we define the being of an object, is we have to have certain justifications behind it, to call certain features about an object as its defining feature, as its tattva, so to speak. So, nature of things basically means, according to Shunyavaad philosophy, something that is object's very own, and something that is indispensable for its being or its bhava. So, this is what is signified by the terms svava and bhava. So, it has to be something that actually belongs to the object, signified by the term sva. So, it has to somehow define the very identity or entity of an object, and it has to be something of the kind that is indispensable for its being. It has to be definitive about the very being of an object as such. So, swabhava would be something that could be said to be, that could be said to be therefore the object's own nature or its swabhava. So, mainly the idea here is that when we are inquiring about the nature of an object, what we are looking for is something that is definitive about that object, something that unequivocally, conclusively gives us a definition of an object that defines the very being, the very nature of being of that object. So, when we inquire into the nature of an object, basically this is what we are looking for. So, first of all, before we enter into an answer to the question regarding swabhava of an object, we should be very clear in mind about what exactly is that what exactly is the answer that we are looking for. And the answer that we are looking for is the swabhava of a thing, something that is that defines an object conclusively, unequivocally, with utmost clarity, and something that is that is intimately object's own, and it is something that defines that is something that is indispensable about the object, and something that could be in that sense could be considered as the real nature of the object. Now, when we try to look into that question, the next question that arises is, how do we ascertain, how do we make any judgment, how do we form any judgment about the swabhava of a thing? What should be our mode of inquiry? In which direction to look for answers to this question? Now, As generally, the method of inquiry regarding swabhava of an object, used to be in ancient times, the causation of a thing. So something, that gives birth to an object, something where the object comes from, that could probably be something where the object gets its nature from, or where it gets its swabhava from, or where it gets its very own being from. So, in order to have answer to the question regarding the swabhava of thing, one entry point, to have an inquiry into this question could be to take into consideration, the origin, of a particular thing. What is it that gives birth to a thing? So maybe an answer to this question, maybe we could get an answer to this question through, by defining its origination process, by defining the process of its origination. So, we might want to know, what we call the jati. This is a term that occurs in Nyaya philosophy as well, and is used at several places generally in Sanskrit literature. So, the term jati basically refers to, coming from. This is, what the word generally refers to. So, if we are able to know where, what is the point of origination, where the object comes from, then probably we could know we could say with certain degree of certainty about the swabhava, or about the own being of that object. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that first of all, the question regarding the question regarding the very nature of things is philosophically very important for us. But the question that is equally important is where to look for answers, and probably the best answer to it could be considering taking also the point of view of ancient philosophy. So one good entry point into ascertaining the swabhava of things could be to inquire into the process of origination, the process of causation that leads to origin of a particular thing, or that brings something into existence. So, but the next question that we need to take up in this line of inquiry is there any theory about the origination of things which could account for the nature of things? So the next question that arises from here is there must be different ways of looking at causation of things, and there could be different theories about it. And probably if we examine these theories, we may find some theory well suited to give us an account of what actually constitutes the swabhava of a thing, or the very own nature of a particular thing. So therefore, in order to get an answer, in order to get a conclusive answer regarding the swabhava, or the nature of thing, we need to examine different theories of causation that are available to us. And this particular section, there is not one text, a Shunyavadan text, that deals with this question, but there are several of them. So there are several sections in many Shunyavadan texts, including Mool Madhyamika Karika. So the very first section of the text called Mool Madhyamika Karika is supposed to be authored by Nagarjuna, who is the propounder of this school. So the very first section is called Pratyaya Pariksha, or an examination into an inquiry into the causes, what could be called the cause of a particular thing. So examination of the process of causation of a particular thing might give us an answer to swabhava, what constitutes the nature of a particular thing. Now, so the next question now, moving on from here, the next question that we need to take up in this line of inquiry is, what are the different theories of causation? What could be different ways of understanding the process of causation? Now, if we look at the ancient times when several of these questions were being taken up and were being theorized, so we find mainly two theories of causation, namely Satkaryavada and Asatkaryavada. So now, according to Satkaryavada, the thesis, according to Satkaryavada theory, effect pre-exists in cause. So the effect is already there in the cause. So there is actually nothing new happening. So now even etymologically, if we look at this word, so the Satkaryavad basically is formed by the word Sat, Karya, and Vad. So Sat means the very being, the very existence of something. So basically, the idea here is that being has certain kind of certain kind of substantial non-duality about itself. And though there is manifest plurality, but somehow that manifest plurality could be reduced to some single substance, namely Sat. So there could be one single substance which could account for the entire, for all the plurality that we see around us. So basically, the idea in Satkaryavad is that there is one single substance which could account for the existence of each and everything in the universe. So everything comes from the same single reality. But the further implications of this view would be, in that case, that everything comes from the same cause, which would further mean that effect is already there in the cause. So now, having understood that, we could, and of course, and before we talk further about it, we must know about the other point of view. The other point of view regarding causation is Asatkaryavada. The main thesis of Asatkaryavada is that effect does not pre-exist in the cause, but effect is a new object, and there is no way to hold that it did already exist prior to its origination. So according to it, effect is a new object and did not exist prior to its origination. So the very term Asatkaryavada, so Asat basically means that there is no way for us to prove that that effect is already there in the cause. So this theory is also called Arambhavad, which means that things have an actual beginning in time. So there is an actual production of something happening, and that something is not something that was already there, because then the very process of something coming into being wouldn't make sense. So there is a production of new thing according to Satkaryavada. Now, having understood that the two main theses regarding causation of things, we could now take up each of these theories individually, and we could look at the strengths and deficiencies of these different theories regarding the causation of things. Now, we've already understood what basically is implied by Satkaryavada theory of causation. Now, there could be certain objections against Satkaryavada theory, according to which effect pre-exists in cause. Effect is already there in the cause, and it just gets manifested in the process of causation. Now, one of the main objections against Satkaryavada would be that if the effect is already there, then the very distinction between cause and effect is lost. Then what is the point in calling a certain thing an effect of something else? Because potentially speaking, since all the plurality in the universe could be reduced to one single substance or Sat, therefore the very distinction, even the linguistic distinction that includes the linguistic distinction between cause and effect, does not make much sense. So, how do we differentiate between cause and effect? The differentiating element between the cause and effect has to be accounted for. If the effect is already there in the cause, then probably somebody could say that effect and cause in that case are not different, but they are same. If effect is already there in the cause, then cause is effect as well. And if cause is effect, then that would mean there is no basic difference between the two. And that would further imply that there is no way of differentiating between the two. So that would imply that there is no actual distinction between cause and effect. But in language, this distinction exists. And according to the realist like Nyaya, if there is a word for something, then there is an actual corresponding thing, an actual corresponding object, an actual object that corresponds to that word. So since we have the word, two different words, cause and effect, so there must be two different objects accounting for it. Now this distinction cannot be accounted for within Satkaryavada framework of causation. Second objection that is placed against Asatkaryavada theory is production cannot be something, the factors accounting for or leading to or triggering production of something, causation of something, cannot be intrinsic to the cause, cannot be already residing in the cause. They have to be something external to the cause, because if the causes or the conditions of production or of causation are already intrinsic to the cause, then causation should be constantly happening, should be perpetually happening, should be happening all the time. So therefore the something that triggers, or something, the reason for something else, for an effect to arise, cannot be something that is intrinsic to the cause, because in that case cause should be always, should perpetually, without any reason, without any conditions, should always be resulting in certain kinds of effects, and this process has to be in that case unceasing. Therefore, if we hold that the reasons for a production of thing, the conditions of the very conditions, the very triggers that start the process of causation of a particular thing are intrinsic to the cause, then it does not hold to reason, because in that case there should be perpetual causation, things coming to effect for no reason. This is what should be that should be happening all the time. Now the next objection against Satkaryavada theory is, how could there be production without a reason or external cause or hetu? So, what it means is basically, it's another way of putting the same question, another way of saying that cause cannot be, something, causes of reason, causes, the leading to a certain thing cannot be something intrinsic to the cause, because in that case, we could not have any specific reasons for why something should come into being at a particular time and at a particular space, and so on and so forth. So in that case, defining, to have any definition of the universe would become impossible. Any kind of philosophization would become impossible, because that would mean that things come into existence for no reason at all, which would lead to some kind of what we could call accidentalism. And this was actually a theory that was held by Charvakas, also called as Unyavaad, or Tadrichavad. So the idea here is that if there are no hetus, if the hetus are sort of already intrinsic to the cause, and in which case the effect should be perpetual. Or another way of putting it is that if the hetu is neither intrinsic nor extrinsic, neither inside or nor outside of the cause, in that case things would be getting produced for no reason at all. There wouldn't be any specific reason behind them. And if things are there, if things are produced are there without any reasons, then there would be no way of philosophizing about this world. There would be no point of inquiring about this world, because conclusion is already there before us, that something that comes into being without any reasons, then that would also be something that would be resistant to any definite theorizations about itself. So it is not possible for us to hold that there could be production of things, causation of things, without any reason or external cause or hetu. Next question that arises is hetu. So basically there is this dilemma that that Asatkaryavadan has to face. Is the hetu intrinsic or extrinsic to the cause? It cannot be intrinsic because of the reasons just cited. If these are extrinsic, then then first of all the main thing is that in that case it would no more be Satkaryavad, because according to Satkaryavad, the cause itself sufficiently, without any other extraneous device, cause itself should be able to explain what comes out of it. So there is some single substance which leads to effect. So everything manifold could be reduced to one single cause. So in that case the problem here before us would be, if we take the cause to be if we take the hetu, the reasons, to be something external or extrinsic to the conditions of production, in that case we are already sort of entering the realm of Asatkaryavad, because this is what Asatkaryavadins would say, that there is something, there are some sort of conditions that are sufficient and necessary for a certain effect to come into being, and then there are certain external sort of factors like efficient cause and so on and so forth. And once all the sufficient and necessary conditions are there in place, the pratyayas as we call them, so bodh abodh samagri or bodh abodh pratyaya, so material and and sentient and insentient properties, all that material is there in place, then effect immediately comes into being. So these all these factors are not something sort of that are sort of already that are intrinsic to one single cause. So once we think of the hetu or the reason of causation to be something external to the cause, then in that case we are already entering the realm of Asatkaryavad. So then the main thesis, the main point of Satkaryavad would be lost. So that's not an alternative that is available for Asatkaryavad. So these are some of the main issues that Asatkaryavad theory has to face regarding how a thing comes into being, and and a related question. I mean, that would be related to the question of Swabhava. How does a thing come into being, and how from that answer could we derive the answer regarding the very nature of something. Now, having understood that, we could we could look at some of the other objections that could be there against Satkaryavada theory. So, if the hetu or the reasons are intrinsic to the cause, then one cannot distinguish the moment prior to production, the moment of production, and the moment of effect coming into being. So, according to Buddhists, whenever we talk about production, there are three moments that we take into consideration. Moment when the effect was not there, so the moment prior to production. The moment of production itself, the moment when when a particular object in question is shaping up. is coming into being, or the moment of production of that particular thing, and the moment of effect or coming into being of that particular thing. So now in Satkaryavada theory, these three movements could be reduced to one single movement, which is the movement of being of cause of a particular thing. So since this entire process would be reducible to the cause, the single notion, the unitary notion of cause, so in that case we may not be able to differentiate between these three different movements that we implicitly take into consideration whenever we are talking about whenever we are talking about the process of causation. Alternatively, such explanation would mean that moment of being is tantamount to the moment prior to production, the moment of production, and the moment of effect coming into being, which is absurd and inexplicable. So the point here is that if we believe if we take into consideration Satkaryavada theory, then all these three movements would be reduced to one single movement, which is absurd and inexplicable. So such theory, meaning Satkaryavada, the theory like Satkaryavada, cannot account for change. Things are ever changing. Things are not there prior to their production. Things come into being after going through a particular causal process, and then things perish. So things are in perpetual flux or in perpetual change. Now Satkaryavada theory, according to Satkaryavada theory, this change, these different movements of being would stay unaccounted for. Therefore, such theory would not be able to explain change that we observe very well. So such causation, if we consider the world to be an outcome of such kind of causation process as defined in Satkaryavada theory, such world would be in that case static. Therefore, Satkaryavada as a theory of causation cannot define the isness or own being or swabhava of an object. So we'll look at some of the more objections regarding this in a few moments. Thank you. Welcome back, viewers. So we just finished examining Satkaryavada theory of causation, and the idea behind that was that when we talk about one of the basic ideas in philosophy is to define the tattva of the world. What is the nature of the world? What is the swabhava of the world? What is the tattva? Thatness. What is it that constitutes thatness of the world? And when we ask such questions, which are of immense philosophical value, then one of the ways of inquiring into such questions could be to take into consideration the cause of the world. So the world would be of the nature of its cause. So if we examine the process of causation, then probably we might get an answer regarding what is the actual nature, what is the swabhava, what is the tattva of this world, what is the defining features of this world, or for that matter an object. And in that, in that line of inquiry, we looked at the two possibilities. We found that there could be only two possible ways of looking at this question. One is that effect is already there, is already always there, in the cause itself. So this is what Asatkaryavada theory seems to state. But this theory, namely Satkaryavada, does not sufficiently explain, the notion of swabhava as something constituting the thatness of an object. So now next, we'll have to look at the other alternative, which is Asatkaryavada theory, also called Arambhavad. So according to this theory, there is a definite beginning in time of an object. So objects are new entities. They cannot be reduced back to their cause. So there is something new that emerges from the cause, something that was not already there. So according to Asatkaryavada theory, so we are now going to examine Asatkaryavada theory to see if it is any better at explaining the process of causation and also the nature, the very nature of the world or an object as such. So, is Asatkaryavada theory any better than Satkaryavada? So, according to Asatkaryavada, the causes, the hetu, which is like signified by the term hetu, and the conditions or the pratyaya, like efficient agent and so on and so forth, together bring effect into existence. So this is what the idea behind Asatkaryavada theory. So there are hetu, sort of the main substance, the main material, certain conditions, pratyayas, and certain and part of those conditions is an efficient agent and so on and so forth, which together sort of are necessary and sufficient to bring certain effect into existence. So when certain conditions are there which could necessarily and sufficiently account for a particular effect, then once these conditions come into existence, then effect immediately comes to the fore. And effect in that sense is something new that arises, something new in the sense that it cannot be reduced back to one single explanation. So, but is this theory any better in answering the questions that the question that answers to which we are looking for? So now the problem with this question, with this theory, would be that then there would be questions arising like, where does the swabhava, which is definite permanent feature of the object, come from? Prior to its coming into effect, does it reside in the causes or in which is hetu, or does it reside in the conditions or the pratyaya, or in the combination of causes and the conditions? So there is hetu, pratyaya, samagri, or out of nowhere. So the main question that we are looking at here is that if there is no single substance which is which gives birth to the effect single-handedly on its own, that would mean that there are combination of things, there are several things which when the conditions are right, emerge or result in a particular kind of effect. But in that case, we'll have to keep in mind here that the answer that we are looking for, our point of inquiry, is defining swabhava of a thing, something that is that defines an object, something that is definitive about a particular object. So now this swabhava, because of which a thing is what it is, then this swabhava, if it was not already there, then it cannot emerge out of nowhere, because out of nothing can emerge. So therefore we'll have to have some answer to where this swabhava was, where does it actually come from, whether in part or in whole. So now, when we sort of examine this theory, the questions, the question that emerges before us is, now this Swabhava, which defines an object, cannot be an entirely new object, because that would mean that it is coming out of nowhere. But if it is coming out of nowhere, then where does it come from? Where does it reside in prior to its coming into effect? Does it reside in the causes, that is hetu? It cannot, because again that would mean that would sort of be like reducing a Satkaryavada to Satkaryavada, because this is what Satkaryavadins are saying in the first place, that effect is already there in the cause. So it cannot be residing in the causes, because then cause itself without any extraneous conditions should be able to give birth to a particular effect. So Swabhava cannot be residing in the causes alone, because in that case what that would be tantamount to saying that cause itself is sufficient to explain something else, the effect coming into existence, which is nothing but Satkaryavada theory. So Swabhava cannot be residing in the cause itself. Does it reside in that in that case in the pratyayas? No, it cannot be residing in the pratyayas also, because in that case again the pratyayas, meaning conditions without any any other material conditions, without any other material requirements, should always be leading to certain kind of effects. So just mere conditions, conditions of being, the sustaining conditions of being without any particular substance, signified by the terms hetu, cannot lead to something coming into effect. So otherwise it will be just a notional being of an object. It wouldn't be a kind of a substantial notion. So Swabhava of an object cannot reside prior to its existence in the causes, in the hetu. It cannot reside in conditions alone, because that would mean conditions sort of without accompanying substance would always be giving birth to these certain effects. So it cannot be residing in either hetu or in pratyaya. Then if it cannot reside in hetu or in pratyaya, can it reside in the combination of both? Now, obviously, even if you look at it mathematically, it's not possible. So, if it is not there, if it in the hetus, if it is not there in the pratyaya, then it cannot be there in their combination. So, if both of them are Swabhav Shunya, if Swabhav cannot reside in the cause, that would mean hetu is Swabhava Shunya. If it cannot reside in the pratyaya alone, that means pratyaya are also Swabhav Shunya. Now Shunya plus Shunya cannot be one, cannot give birth to an entity. So therefore the combination of hetu and pratyaya, if hetu and pratyaya are both null sets, then they cannot result in something, in the being of something. They cannot result in a set which has a member. So therefore, if effect cannot reside in the causes or the hetu, if it cannot reside in the conditions or the pratyayas, then it cannot reside in the combination of causes and conditions, because since both of them are already null sets. Then the only alternative that seems to suggest itself to us is that the Swabhava comes out of nowhere. But that's not a plausible explanation. Something cannot come out of nowhere, because if that were the case, then things should be coming into existence out of nowhere for no reason, and there would not be any explanation of anything possible. So it stands to reason that nothing can come out of nothing. So there has to be something, prior to production of something, which could possibly account for something coming into existence. If we begin with a null set, This is what nowhere, the terms like nowhere or nothing would signify. So if we begin with a null set, then we cannot lead to any set which would have any member. So we cannot plausibly hold in any philosophical significant way, we cannot hold that things come out of nowhere, which is the only possibility that arises, that remains with us. So things also cannot come out of nowhere. Then that means, since all four possible alternatives regarding Asatkaryavada have been exhausted, therefore we could probably conclude from it that Asatkaryavada also does not sufficiently account for what we call the swabhava of a thing. So that means, looking at the larger discussion that we have had so far. So to look for an answer regarding swabhava of a thing, we need to look into what causes something or what brings something into existence in the first place. So the question regarding the being of an object or tattva of an object, the swabhava of an object are related to the cause of a thing, and there are two possible theories regarding causation of a thing, namely Satkaryavada and Asatkaryavada. Both two of them seem to have sufficient explanation of swabhava of a thing, swabhava which is something definitive about an object, something that permanently in conclusive final way defines what an object is. So any answers to swabhava we cannot get from either of these theories. So it is established therefore that things either have swabhava which cannot be accounted for, which is basically nothing but saying things cannot have swabhava or things do not have swabhava. So since all the theories regarding causation fail to account for swabhava, therefore Shunyavaad from this concludes that there is nothing in the world which has its own nature, which has any definite nature about it. So there is no swabhava, nothing has swabhava, nothing has anything permanent about itself, nothing has anything definite about it. So, since both Satkaryavada and Asatkaryavada theories of causation fail to account for swabhava of an object, therefore Shunyavaad establishes that there is lack of own nature, or there is swabhav shunyata, they establish swabhav shunyata of things. So therefore, since both the theories cannot account for swabhavata of things, therefore swabhav shunyata or lack of swabhava is established. But then once we believe that, there are a number of other questions that immediately come before us, that are immediately thrown into relief. But what do we understand then by the lack of own nature, swabhav shunyata of things? Does it mean that things are not there? Or does it mean that things only have an ideational or experiential reality, but do not have any material reality as such? Does it mean that if that is the case, then it's not the case that we do not experience just about anything, anytime, randomly at will. Therefore, we must have some idea of things that cause our experiences. So a larger question, once we establish the way Shunyavaad seems to conclude from this that things are swabhav shunya, then the next question that arises is, what do we understand by things being there, but things being there without any swabhava? Does it mean that things are not there? That's a very difficult thesis to hold, because things do seem to be there. Other alternative is, should we understand in that case that things only have ideational things are mere ideas, things have only reality so far as we experience them, but there is no actual corresponding counterpart of the material counterpart of these experiences in the world. If that were the case, then that would also mean that we should have experience of anything, anywhere, at any time. But that does not happen. So we do, there is a certain order in our experience. Like I'm meaning to say that there is, there's nothing, absolutely random about our experiences. There is a definite order that seems to suggest itself, the way we experience things around us, the way we know them, experiences, don't seem to be random in the way they must be if they do not have any material actual counterpart in the world. Therefore, we must have some notion of things being there. But in that case, if things are there, what do we mean by there being swabhav shunya? Now, the meaning of swabhav shunyata is something, in that case, we must inquire into, to properly understand the Shunyavadan standpoint on this issue. So, lack of own nature or swabhav shunyata of things, therefore, does not mean non-being or abhava of the object, but only refers to its non-definitive nature. It does not have an existence, which means that the object does not have an existence or being, but one which is not its own. So, the idea here, the idea of swabhav shunyata is not, is not something that could be reduced to abhava of things. When we say that things do not have a swabhava, we do not mean, or when we say that things do not have their, any nature of their own, we do not mean that things are not, are therefore not there. It does not mean the non-being of a thing. It only means that things do have an existence, but that existence could not be called the own existence of a thing. But what do we understand? This sounds a little absurd. Things do have an existence, but that the existence could not be called their own. Defined by the term, signified by the term swa. It's not their own existence. It's not it does not define their swa, or their ownness, their identity. So what kind of existence would that be? So the next question is, then what kind of existence would that be which is devoid of swabhava, which is swabhava shunya? The possible answer to that, coming forth from Shunyavadan, philosopher, would be that existence is borrowed existence. Ni swabhava or swabhava shunya existence is borrowed existence, which means that it is an existence that has nothing of its own. It has an existence, which is not self-sustained. Existence that is dependently or relationally there. So that means they do not say that swabhav shunyata of something does not mean that things are not there at all. Things are there, but their existence, cannot be, defined in terms that are their own. So things are there, but they have borrowed existence in the sense that existence is derived from the existence of something else. So that existence is relational. So far as the other things are there, that that something is there. So things are there, but not in definite terms. Things are there without having any definite terms about them. The defining terms exist extraneous to them. So there are certain other things outside of them which bring them into existence. So in that sense, the existence of something is a borrowed existence. It is borrowed from certain other extraneous, extraneous things. This is what is, so this is, like this is another kind of take on the issue of causation that Buddhists have on the issue. So they have, a very different way of looking at, the possible causation of some of things, which they call pratitya samutpad. Pratit samutpad could be defined. Therefore, as taught by Buddha, the pratit samutpad mean this being that arises. Since this thing is there, therefore that thing is also there. This is the meaning of pratit samutpad, which is the true account of being of a thing. So, being of this is dependent upon being of that. If that thing is there, this thing is there. So that means my existence or anything's existence is borrowed existence, since it is dependent upon something else. Therefore, it's not self-sustaining. If it was self-sustaining, only then in that case we could say that this thing has something of its own, something that is definitive about itself. So, in that sense, there could be no definite notion of the self. There could be no definite notion, which would define the self or an entity of an object. So all entities are, all entities have, their existence borrowed from something else, defined in terms of not its own, but terms borrowed from elsewhere. This is the main idea behind the pratit samutpad theory. But, now having understood these sort of three different takes on the issue of causation, now let's take up the larger question from where we began. Basically, the question that we had taken up in the beginning was how to philosophize about the world. I mean, one of the main questions of inquiry in philosophy is what is the nature of objects. So then, if we believe that things are without any nature of their own, then the very inquiry that is sort of so intimate to philosophy as a discipline runs into trouble. So the larger question would be then where would philosophy as a discipline go? So whither philosophy in that case? Now, so the large implication is, but if things are not definite in nature, as defined or as put forward, as proposed by the Shunyavaada philosopher, so if things are not definite in nature, could we have definite explanation of them? Answer probably would be no. Definite, final, conclusive explanation of the object is not possible, because everything is dependently originated, as we just saw. So this runs into trouble. The larger issues regarding philosophy as a discipline, or the questions related to philosophy as such. So in that case, if things do not have any definite nature, then since we cannot have any definite explanation of them, then how do we philosophize about objects? How do we philosophize about anything at all? So now, the answer that could probably be coming forth from Shunyavadan philosopher is we have to philosophize through silence. We have to be silent about these questions. Things are silent about their nature, and so should we. This is how it all began. In the last lecture we talked about how Mahayanists make a big issue out of the silence of the Buddha. So since things do not have any definite nature, and therefore there could be no definite conclusive explanation of things, but if that is the case, then we cannot have any answers to philosophical questions, because in philosophy we are looking for definite answers, for certain methodical answers, and if those are not forthcoming, then probably philosophy as an enterprise would go out of the window. So how do we philosophize then? Then answer to that, coming from Shunyavadan philosopher would be that through silence. Things, are not proclaiming anything about their own nature. Things are very fluid in nature. They are sort of they are not coming along with anything definite about themselves. So since they are silent about their nature, so should be we. We should also be silent about their nature. So therefore, if things are without swabhava, and since if things are without, any swabhava, then there could be no definite answers, there could be no definite views, which would lead to drishti shunyata. Meaning, if things are swabhav shunya, then we'll have to be drishti shunya about them. Therefore, we cannot have any definite views. Since there is no definite nature to things, therefore no definite views could be held about things. Therefore, swabhav shunyata leads to what we call drishti shunyata. So, the larger question in that case is that does that mean no philosophy or drishti is possible? Answer to that would be yes. We, that is Shunyavadins, do not have any philosophy or view or thesis to offer about the nature of the world. We do not believe in any swabhava of things, and Shunyavadins are not proposing any thesis or philosophy or view or drishti regarding the nature of things, regarding the swabhava of things. World, according to Shunyavadin, is in a perpetual flux and does not therefore lend itself to any definite views about itself. So therefore, it leads to drishti shunyata of things. And since the world has nothing static, signified by the term ortho, it occurs in the term orthopedics, so it has nothing, world has nothing permanent about it. So there is, there is nothing solid, there is no solid ground, to have any definite view or doxa about it. Therefore, no foundation is available for any philosophical edifice to be constructed. So we cannot have any orthodox view of any sort of definite notions regarding things. But the larger question in that case would be, but isn't drishti shunyata a drishti itself? This is, isn't drishti shunyata a philosophical view in itself? Now this is, a larger question that we would be dealing with in our next lecture. So for the time being, thank you.
With this note, thank you so very much. And dear friends, if you want to give your feedback for this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in. We would be meeting again very soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you so very much.